Hello, and welcome to another episode of Discography Discussion, where we take a deep dive into the studio albums of a certain artist, group, or band. And today we are covering 30 Seconds to Mars, or as everyone else knows it, Jared Leto's band. If you don't know, Jared Leto is the frontman and lead singer of 30 Seconds to Mars, and I honestly don't know if he plays any other instruments besides just singing. And to his credit, he has a very good voice. Now, I should preface this episode with a couple tiny bit of warnings. Um, if you are a very large fan of 30 Seconds to Mars, you might not like this episode. So, I'm just kind of telling you ahead of time so that you're not disappointed or angry at me because I warned you ahead of time. And one more bit of whatever. I put a little bit of extra research into this that I think will definitely pay off, and um, I'll talk about it when we get into the first album. But regardless, let's get started with 30 Seconds to Mars. Their first album is a self-titled album just called 30 Seconds to Mars. Came out in 2002, has 11 tracks, and is a total of 53 minutes. And uh, no, not really a great album. Um, just it sounds like what I would explain as angst in a teenager from the just decade of the 2000s. Um, Lyrically, they are not very good. I don't know who writes the lyrics, if it's Jared Leto himself or maybe that's handled by somebody else, but um, they're not they're not very good. They're kind of sloppy and just very simple and not really thought out. It's like I want to sing about darkness. How do I go about this? And then he just says darkness for like I would say like 90% of the song, um, and that kind of is good through the whole album. The whole album is just like it's either about love, it's either about hate, it's either about light or darkness. It's about uh, faith. Every once in a while, he'll throw in things about God, and then dreams. Like, oh, my dreams. I have so many dreams. You're a dreamer. I'm a dreamer. Uh, and that's just so not great. Uh, the other thing that kind of doesn't really do it to like that brings the album down is it's 53 minutes, which isn't very particularly long, considering all the albums I've listened to in the past, and including all of theirs really, and a lot of other albums that I've listened to aside from what I've done for the show. Um, it's not very long, but it feels very long sometimes. Sort of like a song will go on for maybe 20 seconds too long. And 20 seconds isn't that bad, I will say. There was a couple albums with like I would say like maybe the Spice Girls kind of and Queens of the Stone Age, where it was like, yeah, this song could have ended maybe like or a minute earlier, but it went on too long. Here, it tends to be something like 20, maybe 30 seconds, which I guess in real time is a little long, but um, in the sense of just how the song flows, it just kind of feels a little too long. And sometimes it's just a little weird and awkward. And also, I realize that I kind of made a joke there about 30 seconds, you know. That was unintentional, pun unintended. Um, but regardless, an okay album. It's not great. I really wouldn't put it up there with like really good albums. And even considering all of their albums, I would say maybe this one goes like maybe like third, second place. Yeah. But hey, that's where we get to our next album. But before we do that, remember that little bit of research I was talking about in the beginning? So I was thinking about it. 30 Seconds to Mars started in 1998, which means that at pretty much that same year, Jared Leto's career was starting to take off. And he was doing movies now, and people were seeing him in these movies. And at first, I swear to you, I didn't do this intentionally. This is all just kind of fell in place. I happen to look at the same years of the albums and what movie he was in that year. So this album was in 2002. And in that year, he was in Panic Room with Jodie Foster. And also, in case you're wondering, I'm kind of a huge, let's say, movie buff for the sake of ease, but yeah. So he was in Panic Room, which was a pretty well received movie and pretty globally known, or at least nationally and internationally known movie, which some might say kind of started his career. Kind of. There was also Requiem for a Dream a couple years back, but Panic Room is definitely a pretty big milestone in his entire career, which isn't a whole lot of movies, but it's not about quantity and it's more about quality. And we'll get into that a little later with some of the other albums. But let's move on to the next album. A Beautiful Lie, which at first I wrote down as A Beautiful Life, but then it became even more generic. Uh, Came out in 2005, has a total of 10 tracks, which is the least amount of tracks, and 56 minutes, which is pretty long, but not the longest. Um, yeah, eh, I don't know. I like most of it actually. Lyrically, it's kind of the same, but maybe someone helped, or maybe someone had a second thought of when they were writing out the lyrics, because it definitely feels a little more like someone was thinking, not, oh my god, I have all these emotions inside and I need to write it in my spiral notebook. It feels more like, yeah, you know what? I do have some emotions, but let me tune them a little more. And that definitely feels very good for this album. Feels fresh, better. Um, a lot more uh, instrumentals in here, aside from just their basic, electric guitar, drums, bass. It, and technically in the first album, there was a lot of other instrumentals too, more so with like synthesizers and stuff. But here it definitely has a little more payoff and it's mixed a little better, which I'm sorry I didn't talk about that the last album. But yeah, it definitely sounds a little better here. And I don't know, I really like this album. Ironically, this is also the album with The Kill. The Kill being like one of their most, if not maybe most famous song that everyone tends to know. Um, and yeah, I kind of know it sounds like I'm doing the like, oh, but I only like the albums that everybody knows. But that just happened to be what it was. I don't look at um, where hit songs are, particularly like in relation to what album. Like when it came to the Spice Girls, and I started the first album, and I saw it was Wannabe. I was like, what? And that one blew me for like a loop. And this one did sort of too. Um, at the same time, I should note that The Kill is kind of a weird song on the whole album because I feel like it's placed a little wrong. I feel like maybe it should have came a little later in the album where it's kind of early in the middle. I don't know. But the rest of this album is really good. Like I said, lyrically, it's better. Instrumentals, way better. And like I said in the very, very beginning of the episode here, Jared Leto's voice is fine. All throughout the albums, I say he's fine. He definitely has a really nice vocal range. Sometimes maybe he doesn't push it a little too far. I think here though he definitely pushes it to, if not its limits, just a tiny bit behind. And if you can't tell, yeah, this would be technically my favorite album of theirs. Um, but that comes at a cost. I would say yes, it is my favorite album. Out of all the four that I've listened to, there are only four. Um, Granted, they do some very stupid things. One very stupid thing in particular. In fact, the thing I would say that stretches this album to an hour for no reason. What should have been an album that was only like 40 minutes is then stretched out to 56 minutes by one song. That takes up the entirety of 15 minutes and has a song in the beginning that lasts about 3 minutes, silence for another 9 or 10 minutes, and then the last two are spent with another bonus song. And I want to thank someone in the comment section of that video, or rather of that song, for giving me a skip time because I couldn't justify sitting there for 15 minutes. 14, it was close to 15 minutes, yeah. In pretty much almost dead silence for no other reason than because it's artistic and it shows emotion and blah 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 blue. Yeah, that's really the main thing of this album that just made me go, oh, you had it, oh, you had me, and then you just ruined it. You messed it all up. Now, again, to go back to what movie corresponded with this album, Lord of War, which is another really big milestone movie for Jared Leto's career because it's again another movie that showed he had acting down. He was an actor. He was a singer, relatively well and well known, and it amazes me. Um, what like, wow, Lord of War, really good movie and a really well done movie with Nicolas Cage. That's the rare part. It's a Nicolas Cage movie where it's actually good, not because it's bad, like Nicolas Cage bad. It's actually good, and Jared Leto does really well in the movie too. And it amazes me that that came out with this album. But that's not the big shocker, so let's move on. Now, remember that thing I said about the first album where lyrically it's not all that great and how they all kind of follow the same general theme? Yeah, they went right backward with this album called This Is War. Came out in 2009, has a total of 12 tracks, and is 1 hour long, their longest album, and their most amount of tracks. And also, I should note, I should have maybe said this a little beforehand, but this doesn't really matter in the long run. They also kind of had that same thing where if you go to a certain country or if you listen to an album or to their album, like say this one in a different country, it will have more tracks. I opted not for that because this is another one of those albums where songs go on just way too long. Um, Instrumentals fine, vocals fine, but it's sort of just the bare minimum of fine. Um, it's not really that it's like good and different in any way, or it is a little different, of course, being not just a copy of something else, but it sort of just barely hits the yeah, this is a song. like um there's nothing like really good about any of the songs that I remember. There's nothing really bad about them either, aside from maybe the lyrics. But it's like, yeah, they're songs and it's an album. They're, whatever. Um, Again, lyrically, just went right back, just as backwards as you can go. It was amazing to me to hear like I must have been like at least 5 songs in, like halfway through the album, and I was still hearing the same lyrics over and over and over again, and it was amazing. It was like watching a train wreck. Like I I, I wanted to look away because I realized like, man, this is bad, but like I have to look just at it, like eyes wide open, just look at it because it's a spectacle and it's amazing and I can't believe it's happening. And it's astounding. I I couldn't figure it out for the life of me, but I loved it in the sense that it was a bad album. Um, so bad that it's just funny to laugh at. And I'm sorry to say that I laughed at an album because I know that's extremely disrespectful, but man, wow, their lyrics are literally what I would expect to find out of like a 13-year-old in the year 2004. Like what their spiral notebook has. Like they wrote poems, they wrote songs, they wrote tiny little rhymes or just tiny little stories. Like this is their like, they found that notebook one day and they went, this is our Bible right here, and we just follow it to a T. And it's amazing, but it's so bad. Now, again, bringing back what movie corresponded with this album, Mr. Nobody, which I would argue is maybe his highest rated movie ever made, um, and one that people are very familiar with, and one of his very large movies that he's known for. Um, and it amazes me that that movie is it's somewhat competent in the sense that it takes ideas and it does things creatively that have maybe not necessarily ever been done before in the same movie. It takes little ideas from here and there, but ultimately makes something totally different, or it feels totally different. But to see that movie and Jared Leto acting in it, it makes you go, who, if he is a songwriter, which I said beforehand, I don't know if he is. I feel like he is, but I don't know who might be responsible for that. But it's sort of like, how can you be this good of an actor here, and so good, right, creatively here, but when it comes to your music, you're you're scraping the bin. You're barely making music. Essentially, you are making as the bare minimum of music that can be made. Like, I almost expected this album, like that at like a halfway point, like I said, like about 5 or 6 songs in, I almost expected this album to literally just be a man sitting with a guitar and just singing the lyrics that came immediately out of his head, and someone put a microphone to him, and that was it. And that's not a good feeling. But yeah, next album. Now, this to me is the most ironic album name entirely. Um, and my God, is this album great? Love, Lust, Faith, and Dreams. Or, as the album art says, Love, Lust, Faith plus Dreams. Came out in 2013, 12 tracks, 44 minutes, their shortest album. I'll have you know, does not feel like their shortest album. Feels just as long as the other ones. Um, Man, they progressed almost none, like anywhere. In fact, I would argue in some places they regressed. Um, Lyrically, the same exact thing. Love, lust, faith, and dreams. Oh, absolutely. Those 4 words right there. If all you needed to add was dark and light, love, lust, faith, dark, light, and dreams, and you could have the explanation of the entirety of their career and discography. And to get the mega power of all 4 of those in one album, oh man, oh, we hit the jackpot. Oh my god, lyrically, this album is horrible, and I kept laughing because you know, like I tend to do with all of these albums, I tend to be doing something while also listening to them, and most times when I'm listening to them, I hear the lyrics and I go, yeah, those are lyrics, makes sense. Nothing really horrible about them. In fact, most times I don't even really talk about the lyrics because most times, guess what? They're alright. They're never this. I had moments where a song would start and I would just stop, like whatever I was doing, for like the entirety of the song to really hear the lyrics, like really memorize them to myself and go, wow, someone wrote this down and said, this is music, this is good. And it's amazing. Remember how I said earlier it's like a train wreck? Like this goes beyond train wreck. This is like watching the world end right in front of me. And and it's glorious and it's sad, but if I look away, I'm gonna miss it, and I'm not ready to. And man, oh wow, um, instrumentals just go way backward. I would say a lot of the things I heard about 30 Seconds to Mars when I was maybe like, I would say, sophomore year of high school, maybe even a little sooner. And a lot of the main problems and complaints I heard with 30 Seconds to Mars was they were this band in the beginning, you know, guitar, a little bit of synthesizers, and but mostly realistic, real instruments, recorded. Um, and then as time went on, they sort of lost all those instruments, and they sort of became the like, we do EDM now, kind of the trend that happened with a lot of albums or a lot of artists and bands and such. Um, and at first, technically for the first 3 albums, that really I didn't believe that, um, because as soon as the first album starts, as soon as the songs start in any of that entire album, the very first one, um, they're you know filled with little bits of synthesizer here or there, and it sounds fine. It sort of fits like their narrative in the beginning of like we're from space or we're talking about space things, sort of. Um, Granted, it would be love, lust, faith, dark, light, and dreams in space, but it was in space at least. Um, but all throughout, it kind of was there, you know? And I was like, yeah, I don't. How could this, even going into this album, I was like, how could this change anything? Even if it did have more of an EDM slant to it, I really don't think that would change all that much or really make it bad. Um, when This Is War started, they lost that entire space sort of narrative and whatever, and I was like, well, alright, fine. And then this album started, and it was like, you know who's famous right now? Skrillex and Deadmau5 and all these other dubstep artists. What if we replaced almost all of our instrumentals with artificial instrumentals, clearly done in some MIDI music um, program? And what if we added just a bunch of dubstep background noises and such to our songs? Which lyrically don't sound great, instrumentally don't sound great, and now you're adding this weird dubstep like slant to it, and it just sounds really bad. Not great. Yeah, I would put this as probably the worst album from them, or at least the one that I like the least, because my God, they just they just are barely trying, and this is where the ultimate payoff of the movie corresponding with the album thing pays off. Oh my God! Now to sort of recap, we had Panic Room, pretty well known movie. Lord of War, really well known movie. Mr. Nobody, extremely well known movie. And then this album came out with guess which movie? Dallas Buyers Club. I would say of all of the movies Jared Leto has done, you have Fight Club, you have Requiem for a Dream, Mr. Nobody, American Psycho, and Dallas Buyers Club. Those are the five right there. And again, I am shocked at the amount of creativity and well done acting in that movie from Jared Leto himself, and the creativity that goes into this album being almost none, the bare minimum. Like I don't mistake this for anger either. I'm not really mad at this album. I'm more so just very disappointed in knowing that, and knowing that these movies had came out with these albums, and somehow here, acting, you know acting while these albums were coming out. Acting was superb all the way down the line through all four albums, and yet all four of the albums are just okay. The only one that ever really, like I said, sort of broke the mold and technically didn't really do too much to it, maybe cracked the mold, was the second album, A Beautiful Lie. And it's just very disappointing and frustrating. But, what else can I say? I guess that's what we have final thoughts for, so let's move on to that. My final thoughts are that just they need to do something different. Um, and I understand that their entirety of their live tours have been extremely successful, most sold out shows, if not every single one. And there's definitely a fan base for them that people like them, but I can't justify them in their music in being anything other than just what I would assume a teenager listens to when he or her or they are mad at just their parents, at life, at school, at whatever. Um, and it's only made worse by every once in a while Jared Leto will just throw like the F word in a song, and it just sounds so out of place. It's like you forced that, you did that yourself. Um, where other albums, I would say, it's like they're doing what they want to do, which I'm okay with. I can't get in the way of being happy with the music you're making and whatever. But I would say that 30 Seconds to Mars needs to really challenge themselves into what they're making. Um, and really needs to push their limits again because it just is nothing. It's nothing music. It's just kind of like it's just radio play music. It's like we made it because we could make it, not because we wanted to and really feel like we wanted to. And I know that maybe in their mindset that that's what it feels like, that they needed to make the music. Or not needed, but that they really, really wanted to because of their emotions and such, and where they were in life and whatever. But I argue that they need to try and change it up because it just feels repetitive and the same over and over again. And as far as plans for another album, I've not really seen much. It's been technically almost 5 years since that last album came out. And technically, that's not too much of a long hiatus from them. I mean, whatever. But I don't really see any other plans for a new album other than just making the music that playing the music that they've already made. Um, but yeah, just a disappointing discography all over, and just a disappointing band, sadly. But yeah, that's about all I have to say. So, thank you for watching. If you like the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and if you did not like the video, go ahead, give it a thumbs down. Totally understandable. Um, if you think there's anything I could absolutely change about the show, go ahead and give that in the comments down below. And as well, if there's any sort of artist, group, or band you would like me to listen to, I'd love to see that in the comments down below because, I'm always open to suggestions, really taking any genre except country. But, whatever. Um, you can go down in the description and follow my Twitter, or at least look at it, where you'll see updates about the show or brand new episodes. Um, so if anything happens, like if I for some reason happen to miss an episode, tend to just go to my Twitter and there'll probably be some reason as to why. But you know, try to keep it consistent. Um, and yeah, that's about all I've got. Uh, yeah. All right. Again, thanks for watching. Bye bye.